Good afternoon, spaceflight enthusiasts, and welcome to a special Angry Bulletin, a follow-up analysis, shall we say, of what just happened with Blue Origin and New Glenn. And I have to be honest here, for those of you who have followed my channel for a long time, you know this. I used to hate Blue Origin. I used to have very little respect for them because in spite of being in existence for over 20 years, they had never sent anything to orbit. The best they could do is a suborbital tourist rocket, granted reusable and reliable, definitely a decent piece of hardware, but not nearly accomplishing the kinds of things that their competitors were accomplishing, and yet still they insisted on being treated at the same level as these competitors. They went to court time and again fighting for their right for military contracts and lunar landing contracts, etc., when they had never been to orbit. And I found that to be presumptuous and unwarranted. And I think the only reason that they got any kind of considerable contracts is because they had a multi-mega billionaire, Jeff Bezos, backing them up, who had the kind of money to just pay an entire team of lawyers again and again and again till the end of time, fighting for contracts that, in my opinion, Blue Origin didn't deserve. But now, at this point, I've got to eat my words because the step-by-step ferociously approach has finally yielded results, and man, impressive results indeed. This, of course, was the second launch of New Glenn. The first flight of New Glenn was pretty impressive, definitely, but this time Blue Origin did a number of things that nobody has ever done, and really it's not being recognized very much. Space.com, for example, they had listed off 5 different things that made yesterday's flight significant, but most of those things had nothing to do with Blue Origin, talking about escapade, that significance, a unique trajectory for the mission, etc. Those kinds of things could have been accomplished by any company. If the mission had flown on an Atlas V, it would have accomplished precisely the same thing. And not nearly enough credit was given as to the types of milestones, the types of first-time accomplishments that Blue Origin pulled off yesterday. Because even though you can definitely not only make the argument, you can say with absolute certainty that SpaceX has been doing this sort of thing for a very long time, landing on barges, reusing boosters over and over again. They've mastered it and made an art out of it, really, and they almost never fail on any of their flights anymore, and they definitely deserve credit for that. Blue Origin has taken things up a step. This is now the largest reusable rocket in service. It is double the size in terms of its payload fairing of Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy. Even though Falcon Heavy can theoretically carry more mass because of its triple Falcon 9 cores, that mass had better be really compact because it still utilizes a much smaller fairing. New Glenn's fairing is double the size, meaning that it's going to be carrying double the payload. But more importantly, nobody has ever put a rocket this enormous down on a downrange barge. Granted, the whole thing with the chopsticks capture was magnificent and impressive and a master class of engineering on the part of SpaceX, but in terms of practical accomplishments, this took it up a notch because this rocket is immense. It's double the diameter of Falcon 9 and also substantially taller. We're talking a rocket that's more than double the size, or a booster rather, that's double the size of Falcon 9's booster, and yet they set it down with incredible precision on a barge. Once again, this has never been done before. A rocket this huge has never come back and landed on a barge downrange before. And again, the chopsticks were wonderful, but the chopsticks requires that the booster come all the way back to the launch site, meaning that more aggressive trajectories are not going to be possible for Starship. It's mostly a low Earth orbit machine, whereas these types of things like escapade and interplanetary missions are only really possible if you're going to reuse the booster anyway if you land that booster downrange, and you don't have to use as much fuel to come back to the original launch site. And also, you can have it fly further up into space before you have it come back, because the landing site is hundreds of kilometers downrange. Again, it doesn't have to come all the way back. This is a huge accomplishment that gives New Glenn a real edge over other reusable rockets. But you know what? We're only just getting started here, guys, because there was an even more significant statement that New Glenn made yesterday for Blue Origin, and that is something that SpaceX better be paying very close attention to. All right, so we've covered the accomplishments of the rocket. We've covered the fact that New Glenn was very big and landed on a barge, etc. But what else does this mean? What else did New Glenn accomplish yesterday that's going to make a difference for Blue Origin and potential future missions? Well, to answer that, we've got to look at HLS and the moon. In my opinion, the biggest statement that Blue Origin made yesterday was that they are the carrier of choice, the launch provider of choice to put human beings back on the lunar surface for the first time in more than 50 years. And this is something that they were talking about a few days prior to this launch. According to Dave Limp, the CEO of Blue Origin, quote, "We have an HLS contract, which is a sustainable contract, and we want to continue that. We think the right long-term answer is a sustainable architecture that can get you to the moon, keep you on the moon, build settlements on the moon, and use the moon as a stepping stone for the rest of the solar system." That's actually not very different from what Starship and SpaceX has in mind, but the difference is they have an option for providing a stopgap measure to put a couple of astronauts on the surface of the moon in the meantime. This is called the Blue Moon Mark 1.5, and David Limp provided information about this, although not a lot, aside from the fact that they immediately sent a proposal to NASA the moment that Acting Administrator Duffy asked for it. Clearly, this is something that they've been planning about for quite some time. Quote, "We've sent our initial summary of that over, and we have a full report of that due here shortly. I'm not going to go into details because I think that's probably for NASA to talk about, not us, but we have some ideas that we think could accelerate the path to the moon, and I hope NASA takes a close look." And the Blue Moon Mark 1.5, which requires no refueling, of course depends on how they design it, but in theory it should require no refueling, and it can get astronauts down to the surface of the moon after executing a rendezvous with Orion in the near rectilinear halo orbit that it's designed for. So Blue Origin clearly has some steep uphill work, however, to do to get this thing to work. They've got to human rate it, and that's never an easy thing. They need to add a life support system to it and an abort system if it's going to get the job done with a single Blue Moon Mark 1.5, which, by the way, I don't think is possible. Given the amount of space and payload available to this lander, keep in mind that it only has 3 tons worth of total cargo, and somehow in that 3 tons, you've got to squeeze out the mass of 2 astronauts, which is 160 kilograms, assuming 80 kilograms each inside their spacesuits, then also a portable life support system, about 100 kilograms, which is 2 50-kilogram backpacks. Again, I'm just reading off what the Apollo astronauts had on the LEM, 25 kilograms worth of food, water, and hygiene, which can theoretically last between 4 to 10 days, depending on how much is used and how strictly those rations are stretched out. And by the way, this is for a J-type mission for Apollo 15 through 17. This is the payload that they carried down. Also, scientific instruments anywhere from 110 to 170 kilograms, a lunar rover, which is 210 110 kilograms, maybe, or somewhere in that area, depending on which design NASA decides to go with. Also, sample return containers, and if you're going to fill those up with rocks, that's another 110 kilograms or so. If you're going to bring back the same amount of rocks that Apollo did, then contingencies such as batteries, flags, etc., about 20 kilograms for that. The total down mass is about 500 kilograms or so, actually about 495 kilograms to be more precise, and that's for the Apollo 17J mission. Now, granted, that's a lot less than 3 tons, but keep in mind you need to have an ascent module built into that as well, and there's no way that you're going to get a separate ascent module built into the Mark 1 Blue Moon with the available payload that we're talking about there. Not if you're going to have enough fuel to rendezvous with Orion in a near rectilinear halo orbit, which is much higher than the Apollo LEM had to rendezvous with the Apollo capsule, bring the astronauts all the way down, and then to bring them all the way back. And again, plus an ascent module, plus an abort system, all of that cannot be fit into those 3 tons. You would have to add a lot more onto this thing, and the more you add on, the less likely it's going to be that New Glenn can deliver it all the way to the moon, even in expendable mode. And by the way, that's the only way that New Glenn is going to be able to get the Mark 1 out to the surface of the moon without any refueling, is if you expend the whole damn rocket. You're not going to be able to reuse the first stage, not with something as heavy as the Mark 1, plus all of its propellant, plus its cargo and all that. It's just far beyond New Glenn's capabilities. And incidentally, the Blue Moon Mark II has much more capability than Mark 1. It has a surface payload of 20 metric tons and the capability of carrying 4 crew, and it's reusable. But the problem is you have to refuel it. You have to put 60 to 70 tons worth of hydrolox fuel onto this thing in near rectilinear halo orbit for it to carry its payload down to the lunar surface and get it all the way back up to near rectilinear halo orbit. And the way Blue Origin is going to do that is sending out a refueling tug called the Cis Lunar Transporter. And we haven't even seen any CGI drawings of that. So there's no way that a Blue Moon Mark II is going to work. There's no way that you're going to have a Blue Moon Mark 1.5 in any configuration handle the entire mission. So what kind of statement did Blue Origin actually make? Well, as I suggested in a previous episode, the way Blue Origin can get this job done is to send one Blue Moon Mark 1.5 out to the near rectilinear halo orbit, rendezvous with Orion, and take the crew down. The crew then transfers to another Blue Moon Mark 1.5 that was delivered ahead of time directly to the moon. It didn't have to burn any additional fuel. Rendezvousing with Orion, getting to that near rectilinear halo orbit, it saves a lot of fuel if it does that, and it will have enough fuel available on board to carry the crew back up to the Orion. Now, granted, this is 2 New Glenn rockets and 2 Blue Moon Mark 1.5s in order just to land 2 astronauts on the surface of the moon. It seems a bit wasteful, but at the same time, the Starship plan involved, let's say, 9 refueling missions, plus the launch of the refueling depot, plus the launch of Lunar Starship itself, and then of course you've got SLS and Orion, so you're looking at a minimum of 11 to 12 launches of massive super rockets to accomplish the original plan. In many ways, you could argue that this is simpler. It doesn't land as much on the surface of the moon, but it can get it done quicker. And how is that the case? Well, because Blue Origin has now demonstrated that they have a rocket that's capable of delivering the Blue Moon Mark 1.5 out to cislunar space, and also deliver another Blue Moon Mark 1.5 down to the lunar surface. Everything that it needs to do in order to deploy these things to the moon is now in place. New Glenn has all the capabilities that it needs in order to get the lunar landers there, meaning the only milestones that need to be accomplished is converting the Blue Moon Mark 1 to the Blue Moon Mark 1.5. Not an easy thing to do, and it's going to be quite an engineering challenge to try to redesign the Blue Moon Mark 1 to that kind of degree in 2 to 3 years, but still a lot easier than everything Starship still has to do right now. And that is Blue Origin's pitch for getting astronauts to the moon before China does. And yesterday, they made a statement that they can get these landers out to the moon no problem. They have a rocket that's serviceable and capable of delivering interplanetary missions, whereas SpaceX doesn't even have a Starship that's capable of getting to orbit yet. And another advantage to doing things this way is to build a landing pad for both Starship HLS and the Blue Moon Mark II. Why is this necessary? Well, Starship with its massive Raptor engines, or even if it uses smaller engines for the descent, it's still going to have to use Raptors to lift off. And this will displace 10 to 20 tons worth of lunar regolith per landing. The only way to avoid that is to have a treated landing pad, which in theory, the second Mark 1.5, the second Blue Moon that is, could carry about 500 kilograms worth of construction robots to begin not assembling a landing pad, but using in situ resource utilization to make the lunar regolith into a sintered or 3D printed lunar landing pad. And it could do it under the guidance of the astronauts for the week or so that they're going to be there. And even the Blue Moon Mark II could benefit from that, because 3 BE-7s at 120 kilonewtons each, well, these are gentler than Raptors, but they're still going to erode 1 to 5 tons worth of regolith, which could be really bad news. That's a lot of debris going all over the place, which could potentially damage the vehicle as it's trying to lift off. You could avoid these things by building a landing pad for both Lunar Starship and Blue Moon Mark II. By the way, what the robots would do is build a 10 to 20 meter pad with 2 to 5 centimeters thick worth of sintered regolith, utilizing 100 to 500 tons worth of local regolith, and also solar microwave sinterers to essentially fuse the regolith into a hard landing pad. Again, this would really help out for future Artemis missions. Another big reason for that, by the way, is because both Lunar Starship and the Blue Moon Mark II are tall, top-heavy landers, and they're not going to fare very well in the rough terrain of the lunar South Pole. I mean, look at all of these potential landing sites. You don't see a lot of flat spaces in the middle of all that, do you? And by the way, that's another very important reason to beat China to this location, because NASA will be able to grab the best possible landing site if they arrive there first. So even though the dual Blue Moon Mark 1.5 architecture feels like a high-stakes gamble, it's one that's increasingly looking like NASA's only realistic shot at getting a crewed lunar landing before China's 2030 target. With just over 3 years until January 2029, the clock is ticking louder than ever, especially given Starship's persistent hurdles. New Glenn's recent escapade success is a game changer. It validates Blue Origin's ability to deliver lunar-relevant hardware on a tight timeline, shifting the ludicrous label squarely onto Starship's lunar ambitions. Escapade success yesterday. New Glenn's second flight, nailing deployment of NASA's twin Mars probes to a loiter orbit, and a pinpoint first stage landing on the Jacqueline drone ship is a massive flex. Scrubs for weather and solar flares? Well, that's par for the course, but the reusable booster's Atlantic touchdown proves the stack's reliability for high energy trajectories. This isn't just a win for Mars science, it's a direct analog for Mark 1's TLI to near rectilinear halo orbit profile. And by the way, those last few sentences are not my words. That's what Grok has to say about the situation. And if Elon Musk's AI is talking this way about Blue Origin's accomplishments yesterday, you can bet that chances are it's a real threat to SpaceX's future ambitions on the moon. Not to say that Starship isn't going to be a fantastic solution for the future, but if Elon Musk wants to be the first man to be responsible for putting human beings back on the lunar surface in more than 50 years, well, he better come up with a better solution than what he has now, because Blue Origin just took a big lead in this race yesterday. So yeah, there you go. Blue Origin has just made a huge statement, even though clearly it's going to take a hell of a lot of work to modify a Mark 1 Blue Moon lander. It's actually going to take 2 of those suckers in order to carry out a simple landing on the lunar surface. That's the only milestone that Blue Origin needs to accomplish at this point. They just need to build the lander. In terms of getting the lander out to cislunar space, they've already demonstrated their capability of doing that yesterday. They have demonstrated that New Glenn is definitely capable of carrying out high energy trajectories like an Earth to Moon trajectory, sending a payload to that destination, meaning that they've got that part of the equation already handled, and Starship doesn't. Not only does Starship need to get to the point to where it could travel from here to the moon, but also you've got to master all of the necessary refueling. By SpaceX's own admission, at least 9 refueling missions. They say less than 10 now. I'm assuming 9. So if you're talking about 9 refueling missions before they can even get their lander out to cislunar space, whereas Blue Origin has already demonstrated a capability to get a lunar lander out to space, that gives them, in my opinion, a big lead now. And they are already working at this very moment on modifying the Mark 1 into a human-rated vehicle. It's not going to be easy. They're going to have to work very quickly in order to meet NASA's timeline of landing on the moon before 2029, or at the very latest, the first week of January in 2029, in order to have some kind of margin against the Chinese. But nevertheless, I think it's about the only viable option at this point. Starship is not going to be able to get the job done in 3 years. It's just not doable. I think it will definitely do the job in the long run. It will be able to accomplish incredible things that no Blue Origin product can match. But until it's actually a mature vehicle, and it's a long ways away from that, I think it's up to Blue Origin to do the heavy lifting to get human beings back to the lunar surface. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. You get access to early release content and some exclusive stuff, also my Discord server, or consider picking up some merchandise in the store. That's available in the description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.